Lesson 7-9, Analyze Linear Equations, y equals mx plus b. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to combine your knowledge of slope and y-intercept in order to write an equation in the form y equals mx plus b. The essential question says, what is the equation of a line for a non-proportional relationship? Let's take a look at example 1. Example 1. Write the equation of a line. The middle school student council is organizing a dance and has $500 to pay for a DJ. DJ Dave will charge $200 for a setup fee in the first hour or $425 for a setup fee and 4 hours. How can the student council determine whether they can afford to have DJ Dave play for 5 hours? So let's take a look at the sign. The sign here in the picture shows us that DJ Dave has a setup fee of $125 and an hourly rate of $75. So step 1 is to plot the total cost for DJ Dave for 1 hour and 4 hours. Then we're going to find the initial value, or the y-intercept, and the rate of change, or slope. So initial value is what we also call the y-intercept, and the rate of change is what we call slope. So what I do is I go back to the problem and I look to see what information they've given us and how I can use that to set up the equation. So I see that he charges $200 for a setup fee in the first hour. There's that point right here on the graph. So 1 hour and $200, or $425 for 4 hours. So that's the second point on the grid. I can use those 2 points to find the slope of the line between them. And the slope of that line is the same as 75, which tells us that DJ Dave's hourly rate is $75. You also see that over here in the sign. All right. The initial value is the y-intercept, and what information that provides for us is the one-time fee that DJ Dave charges to set up his equipment and to get ready for the event. In this case, $125 is that setup fee. So the setup fee is a one-time charge. So even if the DJ, before he's even played any time in hours, so when hours is 0, he's already charged $125 to set up his equipment. Step 2 is to write an equation to represent the total cost for DJ Dave for any number of hours that he works. So the total cost is equal to the hourly rate, 75 times x, meaning x is the number of hours, and adding in that initial fee. The initial fee is how much does he charge in addition to the rate that he charges per hour. We call this form of an equation the slope-intercept form because you see the slope, m, and you also see the initial value, b, which is what we call the y-intercept. So slope-intercept form is in the form of the equation y equals slope times x plus the y-intercept. That's the y equals m times x plus b. And b is the letter that we use to indicate what that initial value was. Okay. In order to see if the student council has enough money to have DJ Dave play for 5 hours, we can take our equation that we just wrote and solve it for when x equals 5. to see if they have enough money. So by substituting in 5 where x went and solving that equation, you get 500. So if the total cost is $500, the student council can afford DJ Dave because that's how much money they have to spend. Now let's look at the try it. Write a linear equation in slope-intercept form. So that's the y equals m for slope, x plus b for y-intercept for this graph. First, let's look at what the y-intercept is. Remember, the y-intercept is where that graph crosses the y-axis. And I'm just putting now a point on the y-axis to show that. So it crosses the y-axis at 2. Next, we need to calculate the slope. Remember, the slope of the line is the rise over the run. So the rise is the top number. How high does it move up or down from one point to the next? And the run is the horizontal distance. How far does it move from left to right or right to left? In this case, to get to the next point on the graph, it crosses through the grid lines. You can see that they are moving from that y-intercept number at 2 up 1, 2, 3 units up. So that's my rise. And it's moving over 1, 2, 3, 4. So the run is 4. And we can check that by going between the next 2 points. Up 1, 2, 3 again. And over 1, 2, 3, 4. So the rise each time is 3 and the run each time is 4. So the equation in slope-intercept form says y equals the slope, in this case the slope is 3/4 x plus the y-intercept, which is 2. So this equation in slope-intercept form would be written as y equals 3/4 x plus 2. So what two values do you need to know to write an equation of a line? In this case, we have to know the slope, and we're calling that m, and we have to know the y-intercept. In this case, we're calling that b. So once we know the slope and the y-intercept, we can write the equation of any line, including lines that are not proportional. Next, let's consider example 2. Write a linear equation given its graph. A saltwater solution is cooled to -6 degrees Celsius. During an experiment, the mixture is heated at a steady rate. Write an equation to represent the temperature y after x minutes. First, we're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept from the graph. So the easy part to do is first pick out the y-intercept, the y-coordinate of that ordered pair. And here you can see the y-intercept is at -6. Next, we need to find the slope of this line by using the 2 points. One of those points is the y-intercept. The other point is where the line crosses the x-axis, and you can see that that point is the point 3, 0. So by looking at the line itself, we can see that between those 2 points, the line has gone up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and has gone over 1, 2, 3. So the slope is 6/3, which actually simplifies to 2 whole. So when we know the slope and the y-intercept, we can simply substitute those values in for m and b into our equation. So the equation of the line is y equals 2x minus 6. Now the next question is, why is it subtraction in that problem when the equation in slope-intercept form says y equals mx plus b? Well, remember the y-intercept of this line that you see on the graph is a negative value. So y equals 2x plus -6 would be an equivalent form of that equation, And to simplify it, we simply turn the adding a negative back into subtraction. Now let's look at example 3. Graph a given linear equation. So this time they're going to give us the equation, and our job is to put it on the graph. So the first thing that we do is we look at the equation and we identify the parts. The first thing that I see is the y-intercept, and the y-intercept right here is the plus b. So b equals 3. Next, I look at my equation and I see the slope. So the slope is at -4. So what that tells us is that we can use that information, specifically the y-intercept at 3, put a point there on the graph, and now I'm going to use -4 as my slope. In other words, -4 is the same as -4/1. So my rise is a negative number and my run is a positive number. So what that tells me is I'm going to go down 4 and then I'm going to go to the right 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and down 1 gives me the point here, which is at the ordered pair 1, 1. No, I'm sorry, 1, -1. And when I connect those two ordered pairs, I create the line. Now I'd like for you to do the try it questions. See if you can write the equation for the line in part A and see if you can graph the equation in part B. We'll come back and check answers in just a moment. Pause the video while you try those. First, take a look at part A. Identify the y-intercept where the line crosses that y-axis at 2. Then we're going to look for the slope. Notice that the line is decreasing from left to right, so it's going downward, which means the slope is negative. So what I've done is I've marked that it moves down 2 spaces and it moves over 4 spaces. So the rise is actually a descent of -2 and the run is still a +4, which simplifies to a -1/2. So when I write the equation of my line, I'm going to substitute for m, the -1/2, and substitute for b, the y-intercept number, which is 2. So y equals -1/2x plus 2. Now let's take a look at the answer for part B. The first thing that we need to do is identify the slope and the y-intercept. In the equation, y equals 1/3 x minus 5. The slope is the 1/3, and the subtracting 5 means the y-intercept is a -5. So I put on the graph the ordered pair 0, -5 to show where the line will cross the y-axis. The next thing that I'm going to do is use the slope, 1/3, in order to mark off on the graph and find the next point. So 1/3 is a positive slope, which means I'm going to be moving up and to the right. So my rise is 1, so that moves me from a -5 to a -4, and my run is 3, so I'm going to move over 1, 2, 3, and that's where my second point goes. Now, to make it easier to connect my points, I can do the slope again, starting from the new ordered pair and going up 1, and then moving across 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I have 3 points that I should be able to easily connect, like so, to make the graph of the line that's represented from y equals 1/3 x minus 5.